My name is Stephen Woods, and on Father's Day, my daughter handed me a $2 lottery ticket while giving her father-in-law a $13,000 cruise paid with my own money. Everyone at the table laughed, but inside I felt something break. She smirked and said, "If you win, remember half is mine." That ticket, the joke she tossed across my table, turned out to be worth $120 million. What followed wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, public humiliation, and the truth of what family really means. I'm going to tell you how I went from being ridiculed with scraps to reclaiming my dignity in front of the world. Before we begin, I want to ask, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like mine. On Father's Day, I sat at my own dining table watching sunlight spill across the wood I'd polished for years when my daughter tossed a small, crumpled lottery ticket toward me. "Here you go, Dad. If you win, remember half is mine." Her words were laced with laughter, but they cut deeper than any insult. My weathered hands smoothed the flimsy paper, $2 worth of nothing, while across the table she pulled out a silk-lined box for her father-in-law, Eric. Out came 2 cruise tickets, shimmering under the light. "These cost $13,000, she announced proudly, "and Eric deserves the best." I froze. My own child, whom I had raised by grinding through 60-hour weeks, double shifts at the garage, and sleepless nights to pay her tuition, had just declared another man deserving while mocking me with scraps. I forced a smile, the kind you give to avoid a scene, and muttered, "Very thoughtful, sweetheart." But my chest burned as Eric, dressed in a starched shirt, puffed up with satisfaction. He spread those golden embossed tickets like a king displaying treasure. "Now this is a real gift," he said, his eyes locking on mine. "Your father taught you well." The silence around the table was deafening. My sister Margaret shifted uncomfortably, my nephew Tommy couldn't lift his gaze, and even young Jake, usually glued to his phone, looked confused. Yet Kara, my daughter, laughed as if it were all a harmless joke. "Actions speak louder than words," she said. "Eric has always been there for us financially. This cruise is just our way of saying thank you." Her words landed like stones. I remembered the long nights fixing transmissions in winter cold, the calluses on my palms, the years I sacrificed every comfort so she could walk into a classroom debt-free. That had been my thank you. But to her, it was forgotten, replaced by Eric's checks for country club dues and private school tuition. I sat with that $2 ticket in my hand, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. My worth, it seemed, had been reduced to a gag gift at my own table. The food turned to ash in my mouth as I forced myself to nod. "Sounds wonderful," I murmured. My throat tightened. When dinner ended, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through my house like a verdict. My daughter's laughter trailed into the evening air as they drove away with their cruise tickets. I remained at the table, staring at the tiny scrap of paper in my hand. A joke, a humiliation. And yet I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I slipped it into my pocket more out of habit than hope. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the very gift she used to belittle me would become the cornerstone of her undoing. So I ask you, if your own child humiliated you like that in front of family, how would you react? Her laugh lingered long after the door closed, echoing off the walls of my modest home. I sat there with the lottery ticket pressed flat against the tablecloth, the numbers blurry through the sting in my eyes. For a moment, I wasn't looking at paper. I was looking at the sum of my worth in her eyes. $2. That was all. Memories pressed in like ghosts. I could still see the grease-stained walls of the old garage where I worked double shifts. I remembered crawling under cars while my back screamed, refusing overtime pay, because I needed steady work to keep Kara in college. I thought of the nights when her textbooks cost more than I could spare, and I patched together extra jobs to cover it. Every sacrifice I made was for her future. And now she repaid me by saying another man deserved the best, while my effort was nothing more than a joke at my expense. I forced myself to rise from the table. My knees ached from years of labor, but the heaviness in my chest weighed more. In the kitchen, I opened my laptop, a ritual of reviewing bank statements that I had kept since my wife passed. Every dollar had to be accounted for. That's when my stomach turned cold. A line item, premium travel services, $13,600. The date matched the week before Father's Day. I hadn't spent that money. I knew instantly what had happened. Kara still had access to my account, something I'd left in place years ago when her mother died, a safety net in case of emergencies. I had forgotten it, but clearly she had not. My hands trembled as I called her, the phone pressed tight against my ear. "Hello, Dad." Her voice was sweet at first, bored but polite. "Kara," I said, steadying myself. "I'm looking at my bank statement. $13,000 premium travel services, did you?" Her laugh cut me off sharp as broken glass. "Oh, that I bought Dad Eric his cruise. He deserves something nice for once." I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. "You took that money from my account without asking. That's theft. It's not stealing when it's family money." She snapped back, her voice hardening. "Eric has always been there for us. This is just returning the favor. You wouldn't have spent it anyway." Her words crushed me more than I expected. Family money. As if the decades I broke my back to earn it no longer belonged to me. As if her entitlement excused her betrayal. I opened my mouth to argue, but all I could say was, "I'm your father, Kara. I raised you. I sacrificed everything you did what fathers are supposed to do," she interrupted coldly. "Eric went above and beyond. He's shown us what real success looks like." The line went dead. My kitchen was silent except for the dull hum of the refrigerator. I stared at the phone in disbelief, the dial tone echoing like a funeral bell. I looked down at the lottery ticket still resting on the table. The irony almost made me laugh. She had stolen from me to buy another man luxury, then tossed me scraps and claimed half if they won. I clenched the ticket in my fist. I didn't know it yet, but that little paper born of betrayal was about to change everything. I couldn't sleep that night. The sound of her voice, dismissive and sharp, replayed in my mind like a broken record. "You did what fathers are supposed to do." Those words hollowed me out more than the theft itself. A father's sacrifice, years of sweat and sleepless nights, was reduced to a duty checklist, a debt she believed already paid. The next morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee and tried to settle into my usual routine. But the bitterness on my tongue was more than just the brew. I opened the bank statement again, tracing my finger down the rows of transactions. Utility bills, grocery stores, a modest dinner for Father's Day. All ordinary, all honest, until the glaring wound of that $13,600 charge. I stared at it until my eyes burned. It wasn't just numbers on a page. It was a declaration that my daughter believed she could take what she pleased and call it family loyalty. I called her again, hoping maybe she had reconsidered, maybe there was still a piece of the girl I once knew beneath this hardened woman. She answered with the same tone of tired annoyance. "Dad, I told you it's not a big deal." "Eric earned it." "You stole from me," I said firmly, my voice shaking not from weakness but from rage. "That was my money. You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me." Her sigh was sharp. "You're overreacting. You wouldn't have spent it anyway. It was sitting there collecting dust." Eric has been generous to us, and this was a way to give back. Why can't you just be happy for him, the man who had everything, the man whose name now overshadowed my own and my daughter's heart? I gripped the phone words, struggling to form. Kara, when your mother died, I made sure you never lacked for anything. Every dime, every moment I had went to keeping you afloat. And now you repay me by stealing from me to give another man the honor that should have been mine. There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought maybe I had broken through. Then her voice came back colder than ever. You did your job, Dad. Eric went beyond. That's the difference. I sat there, the silence after her words pressing down on me like a weight. Finally, I whispered, You've become cruel. The line went dead again, and the house seemed to shrink around me. The photos on the walls blurred, the furniture felt smaller, cheaper, like everything in my life had been measured and found wanting. I looked down at the $2 ticket still lying on the counter, her laughter echoing in my memory as she tossed it at me like scraps to a dog. I wanted to throw it away, to bury the insult with the coffee grounds in the trash. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe anger, or maybe some faint flicker of hope that the universe still had a sense of justice. I slid the ticket into the drawer of my nightstand, closed it with a firm push, and sat back in my chair. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny act of restraint, choosing not to discard what she called worthless, was the first step toward a future neither of us could imagine. The following days moved like a fog. I went through the motions: morning coffee, a walk through the neighborhood, a glance at the paper, but the weight of Kara's words clung to me. Every memory I had of her as a child felt tarnished. I'd picture her in pigtails running through the yard or clutching her first baseball glove, and then the echo of her adult voice cut through. You did what fathers are supposed to do. I couldn't help but compare my sacrifice with Eric's so-called generosity. He wrote checks from wealth he hadn't built with his own hands. I remembered nights when my back ached so badly I could barely crawl into bed. I remembered falling asleep in the garage covered in oil just so Kara could have the books she needed for college. I never called it generosity. It was love. It was duty. It was everything I had to give. Yet she saw him as the hero. One evening, as I balanced my checkbook at the kitchen table, the phone rang again. Her name glared at me from the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad, we need to put this behind us. Kara began, her voice clipped but calculated. Eric thinks you're being irrational. It was family money. We'll pay you back eventually. Maybe by Christmas. I felt my jaw tighten. Maybe by Christmas, Kara. Do you understand what $13,000 means to me? It's not pocket change. It's security. It's food. It's medical bills when I need them. Her scoff traveled down the line like poison. Dad, it's nothing compared to what Eric has done for us. Stop acting like a victim. You've always been cheap, and now you're just proving it. The words landed like a slap. Cheap. After a lifetime of sacrifice, after decades of giving her everything, I was nothing more than a miser in her eyes. My hand trembled, but not from weakness. This was anger solidifying into resolve. Kara, I said slowly, you've crossed a line. You didn't just take money. You took trust, and I don't know if I can ever give that back. For a moment, silence hung heavy, and I thought I heard her breathing quicken. But then came the sharp sigh I had grown to dread. You'll get over it. You always do. The line clicked dead, leaving me with the familiar dial tone echoing in the kitchen. I stared at the phone in disbelief, then at the drawer where the lottery ticket rested unseen but not forgotten. My daughter had made one thing clear in her eyes: I wasn't a man to respect, just a resource to exploit. That night I lay awake in bed, the darkness pressing down on me. I kept hearing my wife's voice from years ago, soft and steady. "Stephen, don't let anyone, not even family, steal your dignity." As I turned that phrase over in my mind, I realized something important. The battle with Kara wasn't about money at all. It was about respect. And I was done letting her strip me of it piece by piece. The morning light spilled across my kitchen table, but it didn't bring warmth. My coffee had gone cold as I stared at the drawer where the lottery ticket lay hidden. The same $2 slip my daughter had thrown at me with a smirk, as if mocking my existence. I pulled it out and turned it over in my hand, the numbers printed faintly against cheap paper. Worthless, or so I thought. For hours I sat with it, remembering the way she had laughed, the way Eric puffed his chest, as though he had replaced me at my own table. The ticket wasn't just paper. It was a reminder that to her I was expendable, disposable. Something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let her define me that way. But the irony grew heavier the longer I held it. She had stolen $13,000 from my account to buy another man a luxury cruise, then tossed this insult into my lap as if it meant nothing. And yet that insult was the only thing I had left from Father's Day. My fists clenched around it. A cruel joke, yes, but it was mine. I rose from the table and walked to the trash can. My hand hovered over the lid, the ticket crumpled tight in my grip. The thought crossed my mind: throw it away. Let it rot with the coffee grounds and empty cans. Let it symbolize the death of my relationship with her. I pushed the lid open and with one quick motion dropped it in. The thud as it hit the bottom echoed louder than it should have, like the closing of a door I couldn't reopen. I leaned against the counter, staring into the shadows of the kitchen. My house, once filled with family laughter, felt hollow. I thought of my wife, gone 8 years now, and how she would have comforted me in this moment. "Stephen," she would have said, "don't let bitterness consume you. Keep walking even when the road is lonely." So I left the house. I walked the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past Mrs. Patterson's roses, past Tom teaching his grandson to ride a bike. Everywhere I looked, I saw reflections of what I had once given to Kara: guidance, sacrifice, love. And everywhere I felt the sting of how little it mattered to her now. By the time I returned home, the sun had set. My house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. I opened the trash can, peered down at the ticket buried beneath coffee-stained filters, and let out a dry laugh. A $2 joke. Nothing more. I didn't know then that fate was watching, waiting. That in a few short days, this same ticket, the insult she had used to humiliate me, would explode into a storm neither of us could control. And when it did, she would learn a lesson she'd never forget. It was 3 days later when I found myself slouched in my recliner, flipping through channels to drown out the heaviness in my chest. The TV babbled with sitcom reruns and news chatter, none of it sticking. I almost clicked the set off when a cheerful announcer's voice cut through. "Good evening, Ohio. Welcome to tonight's Powerball drawing." Something in me froze. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, maybe bitterness. I smirked at the thought of that crumpled ticket in the trash. What better way to remind myself of Kara's insult than to watch someone else's life change overnight? The announcer began reading the numbers with ceremonial precision. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, and the Powerball is 18. The remote slipped from my hand. My heart hammered in my chest. Those numbers weren't just familiar, they were etched into my memory. The very ones on the joke ticket Kara had tossed at me like scraps. I stumbled toward the kitchen, my knees weak, and yanked open the trash can. Coffee grounds and banana peels clung to my fingers as I dug through the mess, desperate. Then I found it wrinkled, stained, but unmistakable. The ticket. I rinsed it under the faucet, my hands shaking so violently I nearly tore it apart. But there it was, plain as day. Every single number matched. The worthless insult had become a $120 million treasure. I sank into a chair, staring at it with disbelief. My entire body trembled. For years, I had pinched pennies, saved dimes, lived with discipline so Kara could have the life she wanted. And now, with a twist of fate, I was holding enough money to change everything. I called the lottery hotline, barely able to punch the numbers correctly. The automated voice confirmed it. Jackpot winner, $120 million. My throat closed as I whispered, "My God." But then almost instantly, another voice crept in, Kara's. "If you win, remember half is mine." I could still see her smirk, still hear Eric's smug approval. They had humiliated me with this very ticket. Now it was worth more than anything they could imagine. And I knew in that instant that the same gift meant to diminish me would become the spark of my redemption. I placed the damp ticket inside a plastic sleeve, careful as though it were holy scripture. My mind spun with what came next. Legal steps, financial security, the kind of planning I had done my whole life on a smaller scale. But beneath all that, deeper than any thought of money, there was resolve. For years, I had let my daughter's words and actions define me. I had endured her coldness, her dismissive tone, her choice to honor another man above her own father. But this was my turning point. The $2 joke she had used to humiliate me was about to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. The next morning, I drove into Columbus with the ticket sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve tucked carefully into my jacket pocket. Every stoplight felt like an eternity, every honk from an impatient driver a reminder that at any moment my life could change. The Ohio Lottery Commission's building loomed ahead, glass and steel against a gray sky guarded by men in suits, and the kind of seriousness usually reserved for banks. Inside, I was greeted by a woman with a professional smile and a clipboard. "Mr. Woods, right this way." Her tone was polite, but my ears still rang with Kara's voice, "Remember, half is mine." They led me into a sterile office where a woman named Janet Chen examined the ticket under bright lights and a scanner that looked more like something from a crime lab than a lottery office. "You said you found this in your trash," she asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, threw it away in anger. "My daughter gave it to me. Circumstances were complicated." She smiled faintly without judgment. "We've seen all kinds of stories. What matters is that the numbers match and this ticket is authentic." She paused, looked me straight in the eye, and said the words that knocked the air from my lungs. "Congratulations, Mr. Woods. You are the official winner of $120 million. I gripped the arms of the chair, afraid I might float away. Janet explained the process, some verification taxes, payout options. Her words washed over me like static. All I could think about was the irony. The same ticket Kara had ridiculed me with, the same paper she had claimed half ownership of, was now my shield. By the time I left the office, I had signed stacks of documents and been warned about lawyers, taxes, and vultures who would come sniffing around. But I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, my life wasn't defined by scarcity. I didn't have to pinch pennies or fear hospital bills. I could breathe. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the official paperwork spread before me. The lamp cast a warm glow, and I stared at the confirmation letter until the words blurred. I imagined Kara's face when she found out. She would come running, demanding her cut. She would scream about family loyalty. She would twist it into a story where I was the villain. I knew her too well. I poured myself a glass of water, steadying my hands. Not this time, I whispered. For decades, I had given her everything: college tuition, a roof over her head, endless second chances. And she repaid me with mockery and theft. Now I finally had something she couldn't simply take. This ticket was more than money, it was justice wrapped in numbers. I slipped the paperwork into a drawer, turned the key, and sat back. The world outside my windows looked the same: quiet houses, trimmed lawns, neighbors walking dogs. But inside, everything had shifted. The $2 joke had become my salvation. And soon it would expose my daughter for who she truly was. The morning after my trip to the lottery office, I brewed my usual pot of coffee, but this time, there was no bitterness clinging to me. The paperwork confirming my win sat locked away in my desk drawer, a secret shield against years of humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady. That sense of calm lasted until my phone rang. The voice on the other end wasn't cheerful. It was Kara's, sharp and accusatory. "Dad, what did you do to my card?" Nordstrom declined me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I set down my mug, my hand remarkably steady. I revoked your access. Her gasp was quick, followed by outrage. What, you had no right? That money is family money? No, Kara, I said firmly, my tone calmer than I felt. It's my money. You stole $13,000 without asking. You don't get to play the victim now. Her voice climbed, each word coated in venom. That wasn't stealing, it was giving Eric the recognition he deserves. You've never done that. You've always been stingy. Eric shows us what success looks like, and you're just sitting there hoarding. I let her rant, every word carving a deeper wound, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I didn't bend. Kara, I worked 60-hour weeks to put you through college. I sacrificed everything for you. I thought that counted for something. You think paying bills is generosity? That's just what fathers are supposed to do, she snapped. The words landed like a hammer, but this time they didn't shatter me. Instead, they hardened me. Maybe I said quietly, but fathers don't deserve to be stolen from. And they don't deserve to be mocked with a $2 lottery ticket, while another man is honored with cruises bought from their accounts. Her silence on the other end was telling. I imagined her standing in some shopping mall parking lot, clutching expensive bags she couldn't pay for, seething that her control had slipped away. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this. You can't humiliate me publicly and expect there won't be consequences." Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long while, staring at my cooling coffee. Her threats used to terrify me, the thought of losing her, of being shut out of her life and my grandson's. But now I realized fear was the very chain that had kept me bound. I wasn't afraid anymore. I opened the drawer and looked at the paperwork again. Proof of my win, proof of my independence. She didn't know yet, but soon she would. And when she tried to claim her so-called half, the world would see the truth. I leaned back in my chair, whispering to myself, this isn't about money. This is about dignity. For decades, I had been the silent provider, the man behind the curtain. But with one crumpled, coffee-stained ticket, everything had changed. My daughter thought she had humiliated me. She had no idea I was holding the one thing that would unravel her lies. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Each time the phone rang, I knew it was Kara, and each time I let it go to voicemail. Her messages came in waves, first pleading, then mocking, then furious. I sat at my kitchen table, listening to one after another, my expression calm, though my chest tightened at every word. Dad, this is ridiculous. Just give me access back. You know I'll pay you back. Click. Eric says you're being selfish. You've never supported us like he has. Why are you punishing me? Click. Fine. If you want to be cruel, go ahead. But don't expect me to show up for Christmas or let Jake visit either. You'll be all alone. Click. Once upon a time, those threats would have broken me. The idea of losing family dinners, the laughter of my grandson, the chance to be part of their lives, that was my greatest fear. But as I sat with the lottery documents safely locked away, I realized something. I already had lost her long before the ticket. The girl who once fell asleep on my shoulder was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing but a bank account. One evening, she finally caught me off guard. I answered without checking the caller ID. "Dad," she began, her voice low and tight. "Do you have any idea what you've done? People are talking. Do you know how humiliating it is to explain why my card was declined?" I didn't raise my voice. "Kara, you embarrassed yourself the day you stole from me." There was silence then, a laugh that chilled me. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can cut me off and that'll be the end of it." "I have friends, Dad. People who matter in this community. People who know the truth about you." "What truth?" I asked evenly. "That you're selfish. That you're cruel. That you don't understand what family means. You've always been paranoid about money, and now everyone will see it." Her words were meant to sting, but they didn't. Instead, they confirmed what I had already accepted: she would twist the story however she could. She had already forgotten one crucial fact, that the $2 ticket she used to humiliate me was a gift, and it now belonged to me. "I'm not afraid of your friends, Kara," I said quietly. "I'm done being afraid of you." The silence on the line stretched before she finally snapped, "You'll regret this. I promise you, you will." The call ended, leaving the house in silence again. But this time the silence felt different. It wasn't the emptiness of loss, it was the stillness of resolve. I stood and walked to the drawer, pulling out the ticket in its plastic sleeve. The numbers stared back at me like a secret promise. She thought she still controlled the narrative. She thought her threats would make me cave. But she was wrong. The $2 joke had become my weapon, and soon the entire world would know it. I woke the next morning to a quiet house, the kind of quiet that used to ache with loneliness. But now it felt like armor. I brewed my coffee, sat at the table, and unfolded the official letter from the lottery office. Each word was crisp, undeniable. I was the verified winner of $120 million. The same man my daughter mocked with a $2 joke was now holding a fortune she could only dream of. But I didn't feel joy. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. Kara's voice still echoed in my ears, "Half is mine." Everyone heard me say it. I knew what was coming. She would spin the story, twist the truth, and paint me as the villain. She had already shown her willingness to do it when she called my sacrifice nothing more than what fathers are supposed to do. With this ticket, she would raise her game. By mid-morning, the storm arrived. My landline buzzed and my cell phone lit up with texts. Margaret, my sister, was the first to call. "Stephen, what's going on? Kara posted something on Facebook. She says you stole her lottery ticket." I sighed. "Of course she did." Margaret's voice shook. "She's telling everyone she bought it, and that you promised to split the winnings. People are believing her. I don't know how far she's planning to take this." I looked around my modest kitchen, the same four walls that had borne witness to every sacrifice, every late night of budgeting, every tear shed after my wife passed. Kara wanted to turn this place into the stage of her lies, but I wasn't about to let her. "Don't worry, Margaret," I said. "I have proof, and I have something she doesn't. Truth." I hung up and walked to the drawer where the ticket rested in its sleeve. I thought about how she had tossed it across my table, laughing. How Eric had puffed up with approval while I sat in silence, and how everyone else had seen it too, the whole family witnesses to my humiliation. Kara thought she held all the power, but she overlooked one thing: she wasn't the only one in that room. Others had seen what really happened. And when the time came, her smirk would turn to ash. That night, as the sun sank behind the houses on Maple Street, I sat outside on my porch. The cicadas hummed, children played down the block, and neighbors waved as they walked their dogs. It all looked ordinary, but I knew my life had shifted beyond recognition. The real fight wasn't with the lottery office or with lawyers or even with the numbers on that ticket. It was with my own daughter, the girl who had once called me her hero, now trying to destroy me to get what she thought she deserved. I leaned back in my chair, the plastic sleeve warm in my hand. She believed she had humiliated me. What she didn't know was that this same ticket was about to expose her, not me. And soon, the entire community would see the truth. The storm hit faster than I expected. By sunrise, Kara's version of events was plastered across Facebook, Instagram, even whispered about on the neighborhood app. Urgent, her post read. My father stole my lottery ticket and is claiming the entire jackpot for himself. I bought it, I gave it to him as a Father's Day gift, with the clear understanding that we'd share the winnings. Now he's cutting me out after all I've done for him. A photo of me from last Christmas accompanied the post, me in a plain sweater, looking serious as I carved the ham. She had chosen that picture deliberately, the one where I looked stern and unapproachable. The comments rolled in like a tidal wave. How could a father do that to his daughter, selfish old man? She's always been generous. He's always been tight with money. I sat at my kitchen table scrolling through the words that twisted me into a miserly villain. The coffee in my mug cooled untouched. Outside, I could see two of my neighbors standing at the corner, speaking in hushed tones, glancing at my house as though it were now marked. It was as if Kara had stolen not just my money, but my reputation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Eric, posted to LinkedIn for all his professional contacts to see. Witnessing financial elder abuse is devastating. But when it happens in reverse, when an elderly man becomes obsessed with money and betrays his own daughter, it destroys families and communities. My wife is heartbroken. The lottery ticket she bought in good faith has been taken by her father, who refuses to honor their agreement. Agreement. That word stabbed me. There had been no agreement. Only a smirk and a cruel joke. But to the world outside my four walls, the story sounded believable, even noble on their part. Eric had spun it into a narrative of a greedy old man hoarding wealth. The calls began next. Reporters leaving voicemails asking for comment. Lawyers offering free consultations. Even the local news station wanted to feature the family lottery dispute. Every ring of the phone felt like another brick added to the weight on my shoulders. I walked to the window and watched the street. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor of 30 years, was trimming her rose bushes. She glanced up, saw me in the window, and quickly bent back down, pretending to be busy. Shame pressed against my chest. Kara's lies were spreading like wildfire, and I was the one left choking on the smoke. For a moment, I felt the old fear creeping back, in the fear of losing everything, of being seen as nothing more than the bitter miser my daughter painted me to be. But then my eyes drifted to the desk drawer where the ticket rested sealed in its sleeve along with the official paperwork from the lottery office. The truth was on my side. The problem was Kara had beaten me to the first move. She had turned the community against me. And I knew my next step had to be more than just defending myself. It had to be undeniable proof that would shatter her narrative. The war had begun, and my daughter had drawn first blood. By the end of that week, It felt like my entire world had turned inside out. Trips to the grocery store became gauntlets. The cashier who used to greet me with a warm smile barely made eye contact. A couple I'd known for years whispered behind their hands as I passed by the produce aisle. Even at the gas station, the clerk glanced at me a little too long, as if trying to match my face with the scandal plastered online. I'd always lived a quiet life, the kind where people respected you for honest work and steady habits. But Kara's campaign had stripped that away in days. Her posts multiplied pictures of her, with Eric and Jake smiling captions about how family loyalty should mean sharing blessings, not hoarding them. Comments poured in, praising her generosity, condemning my so-called greed. Each word was a knife, and I felt them all. Margaret came over one evening, concern written all over her face. "Stephen, I don't even know what to say. People are calling me, asking if it's true. You need to do something before her story becomes the only truth anyone believes." I rubbed my temples, exhaustion setting in. "I have proof, Margaret. The ticket, the paperwork, it's all locked away. But how do I show the world without dragging this ugliness further into the light?" She reached across the table, her hand soft on mine. "Stephen, she already dragged it out. She's the one who lit this fire. If you don't speak up, it'll burn you to the ground." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night I walked through the house, each room heavy with memories. The photographs on the walls showed smiles from another time, Kara with her diploma, Kara as a little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. To anyone else, those pictures told the story of a father's love. But now in her version, they were evidence of a man too bitter to share, too greedy to honor his own child. The irony was unbearable. She had stolen from me, humiliated me, mocked me in front of family, and now she dared to play the victim. I couldn't decide which hurt worse, the theft of my money or the theft of my name. The following morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee when two boys pedaled past on their bikes. One shouted, "Hey, lottery thief," before speeding away. Their laughter trailed behind them like smoke. I closed my eyes, the insult cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. Even children were swallowing her lies. That was the moment something shifted in me. I had spent my life avoiding conflict, believing silence would eventually restore peace. But this was no longer about peace. This was about survival of my dignity, of my truth. Kara had fired her shot, poisoning the well of public opinion. I stood, walked inside, and opened the desk drawer. The ticket gleamed faintly through its plastic sleeve, the numbers bold against the white paper. Alongside it lay the official letter from the lottery office, undeniable proof of my ownership. If she wanted a war, she was about to see that I wasn't the helpless old man she thought I was. The phone rang just after breakfast, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of my kitchen. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another reporter or a lawyer smelling blood, but the caller ID made me pause. William Johnson, Eric's father. I hadn't spoken to him more than a handful of times. He moved in different circles, wealthy, polished, the kind of man who belonged in boardrooms, not garages. My gut twisted. Why would he call me now Mr. Woods? His voice came steady, deliberate, the kind of tone that left no room for nonsense. "I believe we need to talk. Murphy's Diner, an hour." I hesitated. "May I ask, what about the lottery ticket? And what I witnessed on Father's Day?" For a moment I forgot how to breathe. He had been there. I remembered his figure in the background that day, sitting quietly, barely speaking. Could it be he'd seen more than I realized? An hour later, I pushed open the glass door of Murphy's Diner. The smell of bacon grease and strong coffee wrapped around me. William stood out instantly, his navy suit sharp against the red vinyl booths and checkered floors. He rose, extended his hand, and I shook it cautiously. I watched the whole thing he began as soon as we sat. Your daughter tossed that ticket at you like it was garbage, called it a gift. There was no agreement, no conditions, just mockery. I leaned back, searching his face for any hint of manipulation. And yet she and Eric have convinced half the town otherwise. His eyes hardened. It disgusts me. My son knows better. I raised him to know better. But he's let ambition blind him. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a draft of a Facebook post. As a witness to the Father's Day gathering, I feel compelled to set the record straight. I personally observed Kara Johnson present the lottery ticket to her father as a gift. There was no negotiation, no agreement to share. Any claims otherwise are false. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. If William posted that, it could change everything. His reputation carried weight in this community. He wasn't just a father-in-law defending family. He was a respected businessman, a man people believed. "Why would you do this?" I asked quietly. "It's your son she's standing beside." William's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "Because truth matters, and because my son has forgotten what it means to be a man of honor. If I let his lies stand, I betray everything I've built." I watched as his finger hovered, then tapped post. Within seconds, the notification pinged. His words were live, a declaration that cut through the noise Kara had created. We sat in silence for a moment, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation around us. But inside me, something eased. For weeks, I had carried the burden of being painted a thief. Now someone else, someone powerful, was lifting that weight. "The truth always surfaces, Mr. Woods," William said finally, his gaze steady. "Sometimes it just needs the right voice." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to hope. 2 weeks later, I stood under the bright lights of the Ohio Lottery Commission's headquarters. The room buzzed with television crews adjusting cameras, photographers jockeying for the perfect shot, and officials bustling with clipboards. I felt like I had stepped onto a stage, though I had never asked for an audience. Janet Chen, the lottery official who had guided me through the process, gave me an encouraging nod. "Ready to become a millionaire." "Mr. Woods," I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around the edge of the podium. This moment should have been filled with celebration. But beneath the official backdrop, an oversized check, I knew Kara was waiting. She wouldn't let me have this day in peace. Sure enough, as the cameras flashed, and Janet announced me as the winner of the $120 million jackpot, a voice cut through the applause like a knife. Stop heads turned. Reporters swiveled their cameras. There she was, Kara dressed in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her face was flushed with determination, her voice trembling with fury. Eric trailed behind her, tugging at her arm, but she shook him off. "That ticket was mine," she cried, pushing past the security guards. "We had an agreement. He's stealing from his own daughter." The room erupted. Reporters rushed forward, microphones extended. "Mr. Woods, can you respond? Did your daughter buy the ticket? Did you promise to split the winnings?" I stood tall, calmer than I felt. My voice carried better than I expected. "The ticket was a Father's Day gift. My daughter handed it to me at my own table. Mr. William Johnson." I gestured toward Eric's father, who had taken a seat in the front row, was present that day, and has already confirmed the circumstances publicly. There was no agreement. It was a gift. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some turned to William, who met their gaze with cool conviction. The cameras captured every flicker of his expression, every ounce of credibility his name carried. Kara's face twisted. "You're lying. Everyone heard me say half was mine," but Eric's father rose slowly to his feet. His voice, measured and commanding, cut through the chaos. I was there. She tossed it across the table, laughing. There was no agreement. The ticket was his, fair and clear. The weight of his words landed like a gavel. For a moment, the chaos quieted. Reporters turned their cameras back to me, their questions shifting. "What do you plan to do with the winnings, Mr. Woods? How will this change your life?" I took a deep breath. I plan to live with dignity, to help others who deserve it, and to honor the value of honest work, the kind of work I've done my whole life. Behind me, the oversized check gleamed under the lights. In the corner of my eye, I saw Kara struggling against Eric, her face red with rage. For once, it wasn't me being humiliated, it was her. And this time, the whole world was watching. The ceremony ended with applause and handshakes, but I barely felt any of it. The oversized check was tucked under my arm, the official documents secured in a folder at my side. I had smiled for cameras, answered questions about dreams and plans, and done my best to look like a man whose life had just been blessed beyond measure. But my mind stayed fixed on Kara, her red face and wild accusations ringing in my ears. Outside, the midday sun glared across the parking lot. Reporters still lingered, chatting, smoking, reviewing footage. I caught sight of Kara and Eric near their BMW, arguing in hushed but furious tones. Eric's gestures grew more animated, his face flushed with frustration. She shoved at his shoulder, shouting words I couldn't hear, and for a moment I saw something I never expected, a crack in their perfect facade. I slipped past unnoticed, the folder tight against my chest. I didn't want confrontation, not now. I wanted peace, and for the first time in weeks, I felt closer to it. The truth had been spoken in front of cameras, backed by William Johnson's unwavering testimony. Kara's lies had been pierced under the glare of public scrutiny. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the ceremonial check propped against the wall, the real paperwork spread out before me. The house was quiet, but not suffocating like before. This time, the silence carried a weight of victory. My dignity, once mocked with a $2 joke, had been restored in full view of the world. But victory carried an aftertaste. My phone buzzed endlessly, messages from neighbors, old friends, even strangers. Some apologized for believing Kara's story. Others offered congratulations. A few predictably asked for help with loans or investments. I ignored them all. What mattered was that my name had been cleared. Later that night, I looked out the window and thought back to Father's Day. I remembered the moment Kara had smirked, tossing the ticket across the table like scraps to a dog. I remembered Eric's smug grin as he praised her generosity. And I remembered how everyone else had sat in silence, unwilling to meet my eyes. Now those same people had watched her storm into a lottery press event, screaming accusations that evaporated under truth. She had humiliated herself more thoroughly than she had ever humiliated me. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Kara thought she had won the battle by painting me as greedy and cruel. But in the end, the cameras captured a different story, the story of a father mocked, then vindicated. And while she fumed in the parking lot, I carried home proof that the truth had a louder voice than her lies. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Not out of spite, but out of relief. My daughter's cruelty had been exposed not by my words alone, but by her own actions under the weight of the world's gaze. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. She wasn't done fighting, but neither was I. The morning after the ceremony, I was at my kitchen table with the newspaper spread out before me. There it was in black and white print, my name, my photo, and the words, "Local mechanic wins a $120 million lottery." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, my stomach twisted with unease. Because I knew Kara. She wasn't finished. A knock rattled the front door. Not the impatient hammering she usually used, but 3 soft taps, hesitant. I opened it to find her standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red, as if she'd been crying all night. Her designer dress was wrinkled, makeup smudged. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, almost like the girl who used to run to me after a scraped knee. "Dad," she whispered, "can we talk?" Every instinct in me screamed to shut the door, but decades of fatherhood don't evaporate overnight. I stepped aside and she slipped in like a shadow. She perched on the edge of the couch, hands twisting in her lap, eyes darting around the living room that had once been her childhood home. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she said softly. "I was overwhelmed, scared. Eric has been pressuring me so much about money, and I wasn't thinking straight." Her voice cracked and tears spilled down her cheeks. "We're about to lose our house, Dad. The mortgage, the credit cards, Eric's business, it's all crumbling. We owe nearly $400,000. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings." She painted a picture of sleepless nights, panic attacks, desperate attempts to hold everything together. I listened, my chest tight with the tug-of-war between compassion and suspicion. She had played this role before, the helpless daughter in need, appealing to my protective instincts. "You've always been there for me," she said, reaching for my hand. "Just help me this one last time. $2 million would solve everything. It's nothing compared to what you won. You'd still have more than $100 million left. $2 million. She said it like pocket change, like asking for gas money. I studied her face, wondering if she believed her own performance. "Kara," I said gently, pulling my hand back. "You stole $13,000 from me without asking. You humiliated me in front of the world. And now you want me to reward that behavior with $2 million. Her lip trembled. "This is different. I admit I was wrong before, but we're talking about losing everything, our home, Jake's education, our lives." I leaned back, my voice steady. "You need to learn to solve your own problems." The mask slipped. The tears dried. Her eyes hardened, her jaw clenched. "You're really going to do this," she hissed. "Sit on a fortune while your daughter loses her home." I held her gaze unflinching. "I love you, Kara, but I won't enable you anymore." For a long moment, silence hung between us. Then she rose abruptly, fury etched into every line of her face. I knew the war was entering its final stage. She paced the living room like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the hardwood I'd refinished with my own hands years ago. The fragile mask of sorrow had shattered, and now the daughter I dreaded facing stood before me, sharp, demanding, unapologetic. "Dad," she snapped, "without you, we'll lose everything. The house, Jake's school, our standing. People will laugh at us. Do you really want your grandson growing up in shame?" Her words were precise, chosen like knives meant to cut. She knew exactly where to aim at my heart, at my love for Jake, at my deepest fear of family ties breaking forever. I clenched my fists under the table, steadying my breath. "You think this is about the money," I said slowly. "But it isn't. It's about respect. You took from me because you assumed I'd always forgive. You lied publicly because you thought your voice was louder. And now, when the truth has come out, you expect me to clean up the mess you made." She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "That's what fathers do. They fix things. You've always fixed things for me, and now you're going to turn your back. $2 million won't even scratch what you have. You'd still live like a king, but us will be ruined." I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "You've mistaken my sacrifices for weakness. I fixed your problems because I loved you, not because you deserved to be rescued. And every time I did, I taught you that consequences could be avoided if you cried hard enough. Not this time, Kara. For a moment her lip quivered, but then the steel returned. You'll regret this. When Jake asks why he can't go to his private school anymore, I'll tell him it's because his grandfather hoarded millions and left us to suffer. You'll be the villain, Dad, not me. The cruelty of her words sank into me like ice water, but I didn't flinch. I had already been cast as the villain in her story once. I would not let it control me again. Tell him whatever you need to, I said quietly. But one day he'll be old enough to see through lies. Her face twisted with rage. You'd really sit on your fortune and watch your only grandson suffer. You're not just selfish, you're heartless. I rose from my chair, the weight of years settling on my shoulders, but my spine straighter than it had been in decades. No, Kara. I'm not heartless. I'm finally free. The room fell silent except for the sound of her breathing, quick, sharp, furious. For the first time, she realized her words didn't move me anymore. She couldn't manipulate me with guilt, fear, or love. Her eyes narrowed into slits, and she spat, "Fine. But don't expect me to come back here begging again. This was your last chance." She stormed toward the door, slamming it so hard the walls shook. I stood there in the echoing silence, my chest heavy with sadness, but also light with something new resolve. For the first time in my life as her father, I had chosen dignity over enabling. The house rattled after she slammed the door, but the silence that followed was heavier than the noise. I stood still for a long time, staring at the place where she had stood, the fury in her eyes, still burning in my memory. My daughter, the same girl I once carried on my shoulders at the county fair, had just threatened to erase me from my grandson's life if I didn't bankroll her mistakes. I sat down slowly, lowering myself into the chair, as if every year of my age had landed at once. Her words replayed in my head. Don't expect me to come back here begging again. This was your last chance. Part of me wanted to believe that was true, that she'd finally leave me in peace. But deep down, I knew Kara too well. This wasn't the end. It was her regrouping. The phone buzzed an hour later. I didn't pick up, but the voicemail transcribed itself on the screen. Dad, you'll regret this. If you won't help, then don't expect Jake to know you. You'll die alone. I set the phone down without listening to the recording. I had cried too many times in the past month. I wouldn't give her another tear. Instead, I walked to the desk drawer and pulled out the lottery ticket in its sleeve. I studied it under the lamplight. Wrinkled, coffee-stained, nearly thrown away, and yet it had reshaped everything. It was more than money. It was truth, and truth had power. Kara couldn't buy it, bully it, or twist it. Not anymore. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood at the window and watched the street. Neighbors still avoided my gaze, but I no longer felt shame. They had believed Kara's lies once, but William Johnson's testimony and the press conference had given them a new story. Now it was only a matter of time before the tide turned completely. But Kara's threats lingered. I knew she would use Jake as leverage. That was her way, weaponizing love, manipulating loyalty. I thought of the boy, my grandson, and wondered what stories she'd already fed him about me. The thought twisted my heart. Better he learns the truth later than grow up thinking lies are normal, I muttered to myself. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table with a pen and paper, drafting something I should have written long ago, a new will. The estate, the winnings, the garage I planned to buy, all of it would be distributed with care, but not to Kara. I refused to let greed inherit my life's work. I decided to place most of it into a trust to help families like mine had once been single parents trying to scrape by. Families that understood sacrifice, not entitlement. By the time dawn broke, the paper in front of me was filled with notes, ideas, plans. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but my heart felt lighter. Kara had stormed out thinking she'd shaken me. Instead, she had given me the clarity I needed. She thought I was a miser clinging to money, but in truth, I was finally learning how to spend it on something that mattered. A week passed before I heard from Kara again. This time there were no tears, no performances, just a message so cold it felt like steel. No grandchildren at your funeral, Dad. Remember that when you're sitting on your pile of money. I read it twice, then set the phone down. Once those words would have broken me. The thought of leaving this world without Jake by my side had haunted me since my wife died. But now I felt strangely calm. I wasn't losing Jake. I was losing the version of my daughter who believed manipulation was love. That night I sat at my desk with the lamp casting a small pool of light staring at the framed photos on the wall. Kara's graduation, her wedding day, Jake's first birthday. Each picture told the story of a father who gave everything. Yet here I was being erased from her narrative as if I'd never mattered. But I did matter. My sacrifices mattered. And I would not let her threats rewrite the truth. The next morning, I met with a lawyer downtown. The office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place where permanence was created. I laid everything out, the lottery winnings, the house, the assets I had built over a lifetime. The lawyer, a patient man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, listened without judgment. When I finished, he tapped his pen against the desk. "Mr. Woods, if you want to ensure your wishes are respected, we'll draft a new will and establish a foundation in your name. That way your legacy is secure no matter what your daughter says or does." I nodded. That's exactly what I want. She believes she can punish me by withholding my grandson. But I won't let her use him as currency. If she chooses to keep him away, that's on her, not on me. For hours, we worked through the details. By the time I left, I carried a thick folder that felt heavier than gold. Inside were documents that ensured Kara would inherit nothing. Not the money, not the house, not even the smallest keepsake. Instead, the bulk of my fortune would go to a trust for struggling single parents and to the small garage I planned to buy and grow into something meaningful. Driving home, I passed familiar landmarks, the corner market, the old high school, the church where my wife and I had once sat in the back pew. I realized that this was no longer my battlefield. I had no reason to cling to a neighborhood where whispers followed me and my own daughter plotted against me. By evening, I made a decision. I would leave Columbus, start fresh in a new town where Kara's shadow couldn't reach me. Somewhere my name wasn't tied to scandal or betrayal. Somewhere I could build instead of constantly defending. As I packed boxes late into the night, her message replayed in my head. "No grandchildren at your funeral." I whispered to the quiet house. "If that's your choice, Kara, then so be it. But I won't die a bitter man. I'll die a free one." 3 months later, I stood in the middle of my empty living room, the echoes of moving boxes bouncing off the bare walls. The photos had been packed away, the furniture loaded onto the truck, and the life I once built in Columbus reduced to cardboard and tape. I scrolled through my phone one last time, found Kara's number, and pressed block. The finality of it hit me harder than I expected, but it was necessary. Some bridges once burned are never meant to be rebuilt. The drive to Dayton took 2 hours, rolling past farmland and stretches of highway that seemed to cleanse me with every mile. When I pulled up to my new house, a modest 2-story place on a quiet street, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. No whispers, no sideways glances, no shadow of Kara's lies. Just a neighborhood that looked at me as a stranger, not a scandal. But it wasn't just a house I was starting over with. Henderson's Classic Auto Restoration. A small garage that had been on the market for months now bore a new sign, Wood's Classic Auto Restoration. The first morning, I walked in the smell of oil and polish wrapped around me like an old friend. 3 young mechanics greeted me, their hands eager, their eyes bright. Working alongside them, I rediscovered the joy of solving problems with my hands, the satisfaction of turning rust and ruin into something alive again. The lottery money gave me freedom, but the garage gave me purpose. And with it, I founded the Single Fathers Foundation, a program offering grants and support to men raising children alone, just as I once had after my wife passed. Every car restored, every grant awarded, felt like a vote for dignity over greed. Evenings in Dayton were quiet. My neighbor Helen often dropped by with cookies, her kindness reminding me of the community I thought I'd lost forever. Sometimes I'd sit on my porch watching kids ride their bikes down the street and feel a bittersweet pang. I thought of Jake, my grandson, and wondered if he ever asked about me. Perhaps one day when he was older, he would learn the truth. Until then, I had to let him go. In my office at the garage, framed on the wall, hangs the lottery ticket itself, creased, coffee-stained, once discarded. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That ticket wasn't just luck. It was revelation. It showed me who my daughter had become and forced me to decide who I would be. Kara thought she had written the ending of my story when she humiliated me with that $2 joke. She was wrong. That slip of paper became the symbol of my freedom. And while she spiraled deeper into the consequences of her own choices, I had found a life built on integrity, respect, and peace. For the first time in decades, I was living not as the man who sacrificed everything for others, but as a man who had finally reclaimed himself. Looking back, I realized the lottery didn't change who I was. It revealed who my daughter had become. The $2 ticket she used to mock me was never about money. It was about respect, or in her case, the lack of it. When she stole from me, when she humiliated me, when she twisted the truth for the world to see, I finally understood that no amount of sacrifice could buy gratitude from someone who had chosen entitlement over love. But the story didn't end with betrayal. It ended with freedom. By walking away, by refusing to enable her behavior, I reclaimed the dignity I had lost one compromise at a time. The garage, the foundation, the quiet evenings in Dayton, these aren't just blessings of wealth. They are reminders that life after betrayal can be rebuilt stronger, clearer, and more honest than before. If you're a parent listening to this, maybe you've given everything and still been treated as if it were nothing. My lesson is simple: love your children, but don't let that love chain you to disrespect. Sometimes the most loving act is letting go. Have you ever lived through a betrayal that forced you to choose between dignity and family? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked. Thank you for listening.